The world of the circus is as much about dazzling costumes and cheerful crowds as it is about dark rivalry and jealousy. And an illusionist's final performance might just hold the most brutal secret of that dark world. This story began 20 years ago in this very field just outside a small town. The circus, named the Circus of the Lost Knight, suddenly shut down during a tour and never reopened. The locals whispered that the circus's most famous illusionist, Magnus Thorne, known as the Great Magnus, had vanished without a trace after his final show. The police had assumed Magnus had simply run away after the show, and the case was shelved. But when the file landed on my desk, I knew that assumption was wrong. Because Magnus's story, in the tomb of this ordinary-looking tent filled with dust and silence, had been waiting for me for 20 years. Apparently, an illusionist's greatest performance was actually the curtain for a 2-decade-old murder. A few months ago, the landowner sent a crew to dismantle the tent. Among the old items found inside were Magnus's personal belongings and his journals. But the most shocking discovery was a note in one of Magnus's journals suggesting his disappearance wasn't part of the show, but that he had been set up by someone. This note was enough for me to reopen a 20-year-old cold case file. The note said, "This will be my final performance. Alara is planning something to trap me." This was my only lead to solve the truth behind Magnus's disappearance. The inside of the circus tent was like a dusty time capsule. The air was heavy, smelling of mold and old cotton candy. In the center of the stage stood the chest Magnus used for his greatest illusion. But the chest was empty. Beside it were Magnus's show props and his journals. The journals whispered to me the backstage world of the circus. The glittering stage was filled with jealousy, betrayal, and fierce rivalry. Questions swirled in my head. If this was a murder, why was there no body? And if it was an illusion, why had Magnus never returned? Magnus's journal detailed the tension between him and his closest friend and assistant, Alara. Alara was a talented illusionist, and she was tired of being in Magnus's shadow. Magnus suspected Alara of attempting to sabotage his final show. On the last pages of the journal, he wrote, "Alara, I don't trust her anymore. She's trying to sabotage my show. She's planning something." Magnus's disappearance immediately made Alara the prime suspect. But this was just a theory. There was no evidence. I had to understand why Alara would want to do such a thing. The night Magnus disappeared, he was scheduled to perform his greatest illusion, the vanishing man. For this illusion, he used a special stage setup and a chest. During the show, Magnus would vanish inside the chest and reappear in front of the crowd. But Magnus vanished inside the chest and was never seen again. What happened that night was still a mystery. I began to examine the chest. The lock mechanism was quite complex. However, when I inspected the inside of the chest, I was in for a surprise. At the bottom of the chest, there was a hidden compartment, and in it, a special key Magnus used for his illusion. This key could not only unlock the chest, but perhaps the secret to the murder. I went to Magnus's house with the key. At home, he had a private laboratory where he designed his illusions. Among the old documents in the lab, I found the detailed plans for the vanishing man illusion. The plan stated that there was no escape tunnel or secret passage beneath the chest. Magnus was using something very dangerous inside the chest for his illusion, a chemical that would quickly vaporize upon contact with the surface, a substance that could have been lethal 20 years ago. This substance was necessary for Magnus to perform his illusion. Magnus was using a dangerous substance for his illusion, but this wasn't proof of his murder. Magnus had used this substance in another way before completing the final stage of the illusion. Why? A single question lingered in my mind. Why would someone want Magnus to make a fatal mistake? The answer was hidden in a note in Magnus's lab. The note said, Ilara wants to use this substance in another way. This showed that Ilara was the person who wanted Magnus to make a fatal mistake. Ilara was Magnus's assistant, but Ilara wasn't the only one who wanted Magnus to make a fatal mistake. Ilara would do anything to take Magnus's place, but she wasn't sure of one thing. How could she make Magnus make a fatal mistake? The answer was hidden in a special fake key in Magnus's last show. The key that came out of the hidden compartment in Magnus's illusion chest not only solved the mystery of the chest, but also the secret of the murder. The key was part of the show. However, Magnus also used this key after the show. Why? Because this key was not a prop for the illusion, but evidence of a murder. The hidden compartment under the chest didn't just contain a key, it also held a notebook. The notebook was written in Magnus's hand. He wrote that Ilara had a plan to kill him, but that he knew about the plan and was using the illusion to trap her. The notebook contained all the details of Ilara's murder. Ilara had used the chemical that Magnus used for his illusion in the final stage of the show. However, Magnus had used this chemical in a way that Ilara didn't know about. Why? Because Magnus knew about Ilara's plan and was using it to catch her. The notebook contained all the details of Ilara's murder. Ilara had committed the murder, but Magnus had caught her with his illusion. The notebook contained all the details of Ilara's murder. Magnus had used his final show to reveal the evidence of his murder. When the circus stories closed and Illusionist's final show had revealed a murder, this story proved that I can bring even the deepest secrets of time to light. Until the next mystery, stay curious and always look beyond the obvious.